Everyone is going absolutely insane. I'm not just talking about the obviously insane people like Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, but also the regular people in your life, like your coworker, your friend, and your cousin. We're all going completely bonkers over this freaking election. People are losing friends, blocking family members on social media, and screaming at perfect strangers. I'd say we've hit rock bottom, but with 60 days until the election, I don't even think we're halfway there yet. Maybe the worst part about this election fiasco is that nobody knows who to trust anymore. Our mainstream media has failed us by cozying up to the very people they were supposed to be watching. There's an unholy alliance between members of the media and politicians to never really accomplish much of anything. If you're in the media, the less you analyze and the less you question, the higher you'll climb. If you're a politician, the more you pander and the less you tell the truth, the more votes you'll get. The fox isn't just guarding the hen house, but he's set up shop in there and he's selling the eggs to the highest bidder. Of course, it's not just mainstream media that's the problem here. Online media has in many cases gone from refreshing and necessary to discredited and untrustworthy. When everyone is reporting on the news, nobody is. When everyone has a website, nobody does. And when anyone with money can fund another operation that looks like a place of journalism when it's really just a front for propaganda, well, then we're officially in trouble. People often ask me who in the news I trust, and at this point, I'm really not sure who to say. There's so much noise out there coming at us from so many different directions that pilfering some truth out of the void is almost impossible. It doesn't have to be like this, nor was it always like this. But somewhere along the way, we got distracted by scandals and drama instead of focusing on issues and reality. Plenty of good people have tried to warn us and tried to correct course, but we didn't heed their warning, and now we're left with a system that is chugging along despite itself, not because it's working as it was intended to. I'm not one of the people who want to burn down the system at all costs, but if right now, at this very moment, we can't recognize that something is very wrong, then is there any chance we'll ever wake up? All that said, it's still pretty great here in the US of A. People all over the world still want to come here to make a better life for themselves, and you don't see many Americans leaving here to go make a better life elsewhere. Despite how nauseating this election is, look how engaged citizens are. This country is still a melting pot of people from every corner of the globe who came here to make a better life for themselves and their children. Yes, we have our problems, but most of the world would gladly trade their problems with ours. In the midst of all this craziness, one of the most important things any of us can do is figure out what we stand for. As the old adage says, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. And maybe that, more than anything else, explains our current political situation. Nobody in government has really stood for much of anything for the past few years, and because of that, the masses have now elected two of the least favorable candidates in American history. Washington and Lincoln, they are not. All the way back in 1999, a former pro wrestler and movie star named Jesse Ventura ran perhaps the most unlikely campaign in American history. As a member of the Reform Party, he ran against the Democrats, the Republicans, and the system as a whole. Despite all odds, Ventura won the election and became possibly the biggest outsider ever elected to be governor in our entire country's history. Though he left the Reform Party after just a year in office, Ventura had a pretty successful run as governor. He lowered income tax, oversaw several successful infrastructure projects, and perhaps most importantly, got new people, especially young people, involved in politics. Unfortunately, the grind in the system did eventually wear him down, and he didn't run for re-election in 2003. Since leaving office, Ventura has been involved in politics, teaching, writing, and hosting a couple TV shows, most recently on my old home at Aura TV. He revels in being politically incorrect, he calls out both sides, and he isn't afraid to go down the conspiracy rabbit hole. While I don't agree with everything he says, I love having voices like his out there, keeping the people in power in check and challenging the establishment narrative. So my call to you this week, regardless of whether you agree or disagree with Jesse Ventura, is to be a little more like him in one regard. Don't be afraid to say what you think and share your ideas in the public square. We need more people like you to be outspoken now more than ever, so we don't only hear from the crazy people. It's not about whether you're right or wrong, it's about whether you're willing to stand up and be counted. Otherwise, we're just going to let the inmates run the asylum. My guest this week is a former professional wrestler, movie star, television host, author, and oh yeah, former governor of Minnesota, Governor Jesse Ventura. Welcome to the Rubin Report.
Great to be on the Rubin Report. It's far too long since we talked to each other.
It's been a while. Now, first off, we've done this a couple times as I've bounced around from networks and you've bounced around. But first off, are you off the grid right this moment?
No, I'm right this moment in the heart of Manhattan, so that's hardly off the grid. No, I'm in the middle of a book tour, and I had to fly to New York, and I'll spend 4 days out here doing the massive publicity stuff that you do with every book. And then I'll go back to Minnesota, and then I've just signed a new contract with Russian Television America, so I'll be getting ready to do 32 shows for them. We'll crank out 8 of them, and then I'll go to Mexico, and then at some point I'll do 8 more. And we haven't figured out exactly when, where, and how yet, but it won't be off the grid because now that I work for Russia, they don't have the political pull and the paperwork to do the show from Mexico. So it can't be off the grid anymore. I'll be doing it from Minnesota, which of course is on the grid.
Right. Now, what kind of red-blooded American that I know you are could work for Russia?
Well, that's a question I'm going to ask in my first show. I want to know what Russia's done now to make us hate them so bad. I mean, they were our allies in World War II. They fought side by side with us. In fact, they took the brunt of World War II against the Nazis, and yet before the war was even over, they were our enemy. Well, I realized why finally. I read a book on Allen Dulles, if you know who he was, former head of the CIA.
Yep.
Well, think about it a minute. Wall Street ran our country back then. What is Wall Street's biggest fear? Socialism. Well, Wall Street would rather get in with fascists and Nazis than they would socialists. And that's how I determined why, before the war was even over almost, allies to my father were now our enemy. And so I want to know now that they're not socialist anymore. I was there in December. They are full-blown capitalists. In fact, they've embraced capitalism so strongly. In Moscow, every store is open 24 hours a day.
Wow.
Now that's embracing competition and capitalism. So now that they're capitalists, why do we still want a war with them? Wait, as a joke, I said, wait a minute, because they're capitalists and they're even white.
So they've got everything going for them.
They got everything going for them, you know? And I would like an answer as to why we continue to build up to another Cold War. The only answer I can come up with is feeding the industrial war complex.
Yeah, isn't that ultimately what so many of our decisions ultimately come down to? That there's just so much money out there that we always need a new enemy. And not to say, look, Putin's doing some strange stuff in Ukraine, obviously, and some other places, but that we're always looking for another enemy just because that is the money machine.
Yeah, we are now a culture of war. I mean, take a look on TV. You see Arnold Schwarzenegger doing those commercials for the video game.
Right.
We glorify war. We've decided that people that go to war are heroes and need to be glorified. Well, my first question is, how is killing someone else a hero? And it brings up a great point that I did on Off the Grid. I raised the question, who's more powerful, God or government? Well, clearly government is, because God says, thou shalt not kill. There's no asterisk there. It's simple. Thou shalt not kill.
Right.
Yet, if you kill on government's behalf or at the behest of government, not only can you kill, you're a hero if you do it. If you kill for government, you're a hero. Well, that clearly says government doesn't listen to God, and God doesn't penalize government for it. So government's clearly more powerful than God.
Yeah, and it seems that God has a bunch of believers who are all mixed up because a lot of people are killing in the name of God too, even if he says don't do it.
Exactly. Same thing. Good point.
Yeah.
Same thing. But yet you're made a hero. If you kill at behest of government, shoot, they got holidays for you. They'll pay the National Football League to honor you. Did you catch that one?
Yeah.
Boy, did that get swept under the rug quick. When they found out in the defense bill, our tax dollars were paying the billionaire owners of the NFL to honor the veterans.
What do you make of that? What's going on now with Kaepernick and this, and kneeling for the national
Well,
anthem?
first of all, that's a slap in the face to me as a veteran. That these billionaire football owners have to get paid to honor me. Now, Kaepernick, I support him 100%. You don't have to agree with what he's protesting if you do or don't, but you need to support his right to do it. Because if we take away Colin Kaepernick's right to not stand for the flag, one thing people need to remember clearly: you can't mandate patriotism. You can't force patriotism. The last people who forced patriotism was 1930s Germany. They were called Nazis. That was forced patriotism. Patriotism is earned. A government earns your patriotism. A government can't mandate or make you be patriotic. They have to earn it. And Colin Kaepernick, whether you agree with what he's doing or not, should be supported in his right to protest. That's what makes our country great. Well, you saw the second time he did it, who was standing next to him? That Green Beret that wrote an op-ed piece in his favor, stating he didn't agree with him, but he supported his right to do it, and that's what he defended our country to have that right. And you notice the people who protest the most are the ones that were never in the military.
Right. Does that madden you when you see that people simply don't understand the two-way street that freedom really is? Because he has the freedom to do it in that he doesn't have to stand for it. And then other people have the freedom to mock him, so no one's saying they don't have the freedom to mock him, but that people don't understand that sort of social contract that we have.
Well, it was like when I was governor. I tried to tell people, look, with freedom comes the freedom to be stupid. It's a yin and a yang. If you're going to accept freedom, humans are going to make stupid decisions. You have to accept that as part of freedom. That the freedom, and like I told my people, you can't legislate stupidity. You can't make every time a person does something stupid, you can't make it against the law.
Right.
Like, to me, the most asinine law in America, it's against the law to commit suicide. Well, if the person's successful, how do you prosecute him?
Right.
And if he's not, you're going to put him in jail because he tried to kill himself?
Yeah.
And that leads to my book, Marijuana Manifesto. How can you put people in jail for committing a crime against themselves? Now, it might be stupid to use drugs. Maybe, maybe not, depending on who you are. But you're making it against the law and putting you in prison because you commit a crime against yourself in a free society?
Yeah. So in this regard, would you say that you're fully libertarian? Because that strikes me as a very libertarian view. You're saying do what you want with your own body, big whoop.
And do what you want in life as long as you don't harm anyone else. You do what you're free to do, as long as you don't harm another person or force them to do something that's not free will for them. Yeah. And as far as doing drugs, hey, read my book. For 160 years, marijuana was the economic drive to the entire United States of America. Did you know that the British would take marijuana in lieu of money?
I did not know that.
Yes, because they needed it for sales so they could colonize, sails on their ships, rope, all of that. Well, England's only the size of New York State. They couldn't have the room to grow it. So they made the colonists grow it so that they could take it and use it for their armada and their big fleet. I cover it all in the book. For 160 years, marijuana was the economic engine that drove the United States economy. It wasn't cotton until they invented the cotton gin, because marijuana was easier to harvest.
Yeah. So what do you make of the way that the feds, and Obama particularly, has dealt with marijuana? Because we know that in a lot of states now it's medicinally legal. We've got a couple recreational legal. I'm here in California. I have a license for it, and I don't even smoke that often, but I thought if I'm going to do it, let me go ahead and get the license.
Sure.
But Obama and the feds have come in and they close medicinal dispensaries here, even though they're legal by the state.
Yeah, well, they want people to suffer. I'll tell you what made me so passionate on this. I won't say who, because I respect people's privacy of health, but someone very close to me, marijuana has given me back my standard of living.
Wow.
That's how powerful, because someone close to me developed an epileptic seizure condition at a later age and was seizing 4 times a week. And I was there. I had to deal with this seizure. Well, the person was put on 4 pharmaceutical drugs, one at a time. None of them worked. They all had horrible side effects, and the seizures continued. The person then went to Colorado at the time where medical was legal, obtained it. The seizures immediately stopped. Now the person can get it in Minnesota because it's legal there now. Mm-hmm. And for 2 years now, this person has not had a seizure.
Yeah.
And is completely weaned off the pharmaceuticals completely. So it's the marijuana that is stopping the epileptic seizures. So to Barack Obama and all our government, how dare you make people suffer because of your short-sightedness and money? Because it all comes back to money. If they legalize it, they want big pharma to run it. So the big corporation will reap the profits.
Yeah.
They don't want it to where poor people can grow it in their backyard and be able to use it. Like when I grew up in South Minneapolis, every summer my mom had a tomato patch. We didn't have a big yard, we're in the inner city. Mm-hmm. Yet she would have enough tomatoes, we'd eat fresh tomatoes all summer when they came. Mm-hmm. Well, you can do the same thing with marijuana, which means poor people don't have to pay the system to get it and use it. There's the rub.
You know, the irony here, of course, is that all of these prescription drugs that everybody's taking, all you have to do is watch any of the commercials. The commercials, half of the commercials telling you about the side effects. And then with the ultimate irony, it's usually marijuana that will deal with those side effects. So what do we do? So do we need basically like Starbucks to come in and say, we're going to start corporatizing marijuana?
No, you don't want corporations taking control.
Well, in terms of the legal part of it.
Okay, look at it this way. Mm-hmm. I don't like Budweiser beer. I would rather have some microbrew or some brew that's handmade in Minnesota and doesn't sit in a can on a shelf for months before I buy it in the liquor store. Well, that's what you can do if you eliminate the corporations from marijuana. Then you'll have local, it'll be locally grown, it'll be local everything. And that's why in Ohio it failed, because they had picked out only 2 corporations that would control the whole thing, and the marijuana smokers said, bullshit. That's bull crap. We want it to where anybody can grow it, anyone can use it. We want it free like the plant is. The plant grows wild. It was here before we got here and ran off the Indians or the Native Americans. It was growing here. So why shouldn't it be able to grow wild and you be able to harvest it without having to pay the government to do it?
Yeah, I'm with you. So where do you stand on legalization in general? Obviously, you're fully for legalizing marijuana, but that always then it harkens the next question, which is, well, does he want to legalize cocaine and heroin and everything else down the road? Yeah.
Yes. Here's why. Addiction is a medical problem. Addiction's a disease. You can be addicted to food. All right? Tomorrow morning, let's imagine, go to a hypothetical. Let's say tomorrow morning we could magically make Starbucks and all caffeine coffee disappear. What do you think would happen to society tomorrow morning if all these addicts, and I use the term addicts because they are addicted, and people need to understand that. If you have to have coffee in the morning, how dare you talk about any other drug?
Yeah, I mean, my head would literally explode in the morning. I can't function.
See,
Yeah.
I've had 2 sips in my life and spit it out both times. To me, it tastes like crap.
Really?
And so I don't drink coffee, and I'm hyper enough. I don't need caffeine to get going. Well, the point I'm making is everybody's addicted to something. Mm-hmm. Obesity is a huge problem in our country because people are addicted to eating. Now, if they push themselves away from the table and exercise, you won't be obese.
Right.
And eat the right foods. But do we limit them? No. And like when they make it legal, it's not really legal, even in Colorado. Let me give you the example. I could drive to Colorado tomorrow, right? Mm-hmm. And I could pull a semi in, and I could fill that semi up with tobacco, couldn't I?
Sure.
I could buy as many cigarettes as I wanted and fill the semi up. I could drive to 5 liquor stores, and I could buy all their booze and fill the semi up, and nobody'd question me as long as my credit card could pay for it.
Right.
I could buy as much. Yet, marijuana, a Colorado resident can only buy 1 ounce at a time, and if you're not from Colorado, you can only get a half an ounce. That ain't freedom.
Yeah.
That means it's still highly restricted. So when they talk about it's legal now, no, it isn't really.
Interesting.
Because they still limit how much you can buy. And why should the government have any say-so whatsoever in how you spend your money, or if you want to buy, 45 outboard motor engines, even though you don't have a boat?
Right.
You know, if you want to do that, you have the freedom to do that. Well, that's freedom.
Right. Meanwhile, if you buy a pressure cooker, you're on a CIA watch list or something.
Maybe. Yeah, who knows?
Yeah.
But, yeah, and so it still isn't free because it's so heavily restricted right now. And for what? For what? Now, do you know who did it? William Randolph Hearst.
Really?
The big guy with the newspapers back in the 30s.
I drove by his that castle a couple months ago.
Here's why. He owned 26 newspapers, and marijuana and hemp make better paper than wood. Mm-hmm. He owned thousands of acres of timberland. So he bought off the Republicans and Democrats, got them to make marijuana federally illegal, so it forced us to buy his timber to make paper.
Man, when you start linking this stuff together, it's, as you said earlier, it's all down to money.
Follow the money.
So one more thing on marijuana, and then let's talk about those Democrats and Republicans, because I have a feeling you have a couple things to say about them as well.
Okay.
Is the most fascinating part about marijuana that it's almost the reverse of every other vice. So for example, with booze, if you drink, we know you build a resistance to it. You need more to drink. If you do smoke crack or snort coke or drink coffee, you always need more. Marijuana, I find, and I can firmly say this for me, I used to smoke a lot of marijuana. Now I could maybe take 1 puff and I'm good for hours, and I do that maybe once a week. So it actually has like a built-in regulation system to it too.
Well, actually, maybe, but what you may be facing is this. It's more powerful today than what it was years ago because of the strains and the way they're able to grow it.
Right.
Now, that's not bad. And let me explain. It's more healthy for you to be able to take 1 puff than having to smoke the whole joint.
Sure.
See, it's the same as booze. Okay, you can go out and buy a liqueur that's maybe 20%, or you can go buy 151 rum.
Right.
Well, which one's going to knock you into tomorrow quicker?
Right.
The 151 rum is gonna, because of its content. Well, in the case of marijuana, if it's more potent, you're never going to die from it. The great thing about marijuana, you can't OD it.
Nobody's died from it.
You're not going to die from it. You can die from overdosing alcohol easily and all these other, but marijuana you can't. And if it's more powerful, it means you smoke less. You might be able to have 1 joint. If you're a prolific smoker who smokes all day, 1 joint may last you the whole day.
Yeah.
You take 1 in the morning, 1 at lunch, 1 in the evening, and 1 before bed.
Yeah. When I got my license, I went to the dispensary, and I was looking around. They got it in chocolate and in water
Edibles, sure,
and
edibles.
every which way, and vaping and all that stuff. And I looked at the guy and I was like, "Do you have any weed in weed form?" Because I just wanted like old school weed. He looked at me like I was a little weird, but they eventually had it for me.
Nah, he really didn't. He was probably doing that just because the other stuff might be more expensive. Again, follow the money. It is utterly foolish now. We've spent, since the war on drugs started in 1972 by Nixon, we've spent close to $1 trillion fighting it.
Putting people in jail for doing something recreationally for themselves.
Yeah, and they're not harming anyone. Like my famous quote, marijuana is to rock and roll what beer is to baseball. Imagine if you went to the ball game and you couldn't have a hot dog and a beer. Well, when you go to a rock concert in the 60s and 70s, when I grew up, you didn't have to have pot, you just went there. People would light a joint and send it down the aisle.
People would not be happy. We would have riots.
They wouldn't be happy at all.
Yeah.
And yet they won't let you smoke pot at a rock concert. It's ridiculous.
I went to a Journey concert in Orange County about a year ago, and I got narked while my friend and I were puffing on a little joint. I mean, can you believe that? Outdoor concert, by the way. Anyway, should we move to politics? What do you think?
Sure.
All right, let's shift for a little bit. We are in the midst of, I think, what pretty much everybody is saying is the craziest election, at least in modern times. As a true outsider who made it through the bullshit, you got through the system, ran on the Reform Party ticket, 99, became governor of Minnesota. What do you make of, just before we get into the two of them, what do you just make of the state of the system at the moment?
Well, the system is broken, and the system is based upon the concept of bribery, where if you do bribery in the private sector, you go to jail. But in our political system, it's the status quo. You want an audience with a candidate, a Democrat or Republican, you better bring a check with you. Mm-hmm. And you better donate to their campaign, otherwise they're not talking to you. And so it's a system of bribery, and the people who thrive in a system like bribery have to be crooked to begin with. Because if you're comfortable in a bribery system, then obviously you're comfortable breaking laws and bending rules and doing whatever it takes. And so that's really, I think, what's wrong as a whole with our system today. The Democrats and Republicans have turned it into a complete system of bribery.
Yeah. When you look back on the fact that you actually won as a third-party candidate in Minnesota, does it almost seem crazy to you now? Because it really seems that at this point we've gone so far backwards now that I don't know that someone could do it anymore.
Well, you can do it. It could be done this year if they'd allow Gary Johnson. The key is the debates. Mm-hmm. See, the Dems and Repubs hate each other, but they team up to keep anyone else out of the debate. They sing Kumbaya with each other when it's time to keep Dr. Stein and Governor Johnson out of the debates. They're right in bed together on that baby. But the point is, they don't let anyone else into the game. As Ralph Nader called it, the two-party dictatorship. That's what you have in this country, the two-party dictatorship. And they won't let anyone else in for fear that a third entity like I was in Minnesota will beat them. And then, oh my God, what do they do then?
Right. So
if they get beat.
Yeah. So speaking of getting beat, I mean, Hillary beat Bernie, but we know that the DNC...
No, she cheated.
Right. So we know the DNC was in on it. So
yeah, the DNC, it was fixed. It was fixed. Bernie wasn't going to win. They got superdelegates. And the minute I heard about superdelegates, I said, what are these things? That's the fix. So the fix was in. Bernie didn't have a chance. Hillary was going to win, and they fixed. And who did they blame? The Russians.
Right.
They blame
right.
They blame the messenger, not the message. If they hadn't wrote those emails, could anyone have hacked them? Mm-hmm. No, they wrote them. And then how do they know the Russians did it? Wasn't that convenient? Let's blame the Russians. Are the Russians that concerned over whether Hillary or Trump win? it doesn't matter because it's the same Democrats and Republicans are going to be running the thing anyway.
It sounds like the beginning of a plot of a movie that you should have been in like '87, and then you and Schwarzenegger go in there and clean up shit.
Maybe, I don't know. You know, when you look at it from that aspect, it is. It's almost laughable, like a movie script. But, you know, the whole situation is they won't let anyone else in the game for fear the rise of a third party, the third choice. And this is the year it should happen because Trump and Hillary's negatives are through the ceiling.
Yeah.
Nobody likes either one of them.
So do you think...
why did they vote for him then? When you have other candidates, why would you vote for people you don't even like?
Yeah. So do you think the real missed opportunity here then was that instead of Bernie just acquiescing and sort of being put down by Hillary and the DNC, that he should be the third party guy right now? I get it with Gary Johnson. I did a video a couple weeks ago saying we have to at least support this guy until the debates because we need another voice in there. But do you think Bernie actually missed his moment here?
Yeah, and I knew it was going to happen because last summer Bernie came to Minnesota and I went down there. And I actually went down there thinking I would endorse him. He gave me the complete cold shoulder.
Really?
Oh, he spoke to me in a hallway for 1 minute. And all I got to ask him was the important question. I said, Senator Sanders, if you fail to defeat Hillary Clinton for the Democratic nomination, will you keep the revolution going by either running as an independent or throw your support to an independent? He looked me right in the eye and said, nope, I will endorse Hillary. Right there, I said, he's a phony.
Man.
Because he's a Democrat. And for him to now mask himself as an independent is phony. Bernie Sanders is a Democrat because once he said he'd endorse Hillary Clinton no matter what, that made him a Democrat in my book. He wouldn't even go outside. He wouldn't continue the movement. So all those people out there that endorsed and got so behind Bernie Sanders, you got hoodwinked.
Yeah, and
you got hoodwinked.
Those people are not excited to vote for Hillary. So let's talk about Hillary for a second. I mean, from everything that you've said here and everything that I know that you believe about money in politics and a corrupt system and politicians that lie and a media that helps them lie, it strikes me that Hillary is the pinnacle of that.
Absolutely.
So is she, I mean, do you view her as actually a real threat to the underpinnings of what democracy is supposed to be?
Yeah, because it's all fixed. It proved with the emails that the whole democratic process was fixed, that they handpicked her, and it didn't matter what went on. She was going to be the nomination. Yeah, and she, you know, she takes $500,000 to do a speech for Wall Street. That's not buying her.
Right.
She can sit and say that she's not influenced. That insults my intelligence.
Right.
It truly does.
I'm pretty sure.
And the fact that here's the most important thing to me. The most important vote Hillary Clinton ever took as a senator, she admits she blew it. She voted for the Iraq war, and now she says it was a mistake. So sending our kids to war, the most important vote you could possibly take as a politician, Hillary got it wrong and admits to it now. So we're going to put her thumb on the button?
Yeah. And by the way, whatever you think of Benghazi specifically, she was Secretary of State for what we've done in Libya, and now all hell has broken loose over there too. So there's a series of bad decisions. I'm curious, do you give any of the people that voted for Iraq, do you give any of them a little bit of a leash because of the way we now know that the information, that the intelligence community told them things that weren't true? You know, Colin Powell with the rods. You don't buy any of that.
I was doing a right-wing radio talk show host once when I was governor, and the subject came up, and this guy said, it's a difficult decision. The hardest decision you could make as an elected official to go to war. I looked at him and said, you're wrong, it's an easy decision. And he jumped all over me. How can you say it's an easy decision to go to war? When he was done, I told him why, and I'll tell you why. Going to war is an easy decision. Here's why. A war is justified if you're willing to send your kids to fight it. If you ain't willing to send your kids, how do you send someone else's? and I can unequivocally tell you I would not have sent my kids to Iraq.
Yeah.
And that's as simple as it gets. It's justified if you're willing to send your children to fight it.
Yeah.
And if you're not willing to do that, how do you send someone else's kids to do it?
Sure. And we always have money to do it, even though we somehow don't have money to fix our infrastructure and our roads and all that. So, all right, let's put Hillary aside now, and let's move to Trump. I'm going to partly put some words in your mouth to preface this. I have a feeling that you kind of like Trump. That just on the outsider part of it, the wrestling part of it, the breaking the system, getting through the bullshit, saying things off the top of your head, for that portion of it, I'm going to say that you're pro-Trump.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I like what he's done. I like he's fractured the Republican Party, just as I liked it when Bernie fractured the Democrats. Remember something, Pat Buchanan and the Republicans destroyed the Reform Party. When they came in 98 or 2000, Pat Buchanan brought his minions in and they had a mistake in the Reform Party. You could become a same-day delegate. So he brought in all his people, got the nomination, took 30 million of our dollars and never even ran. Guess who watched all that? Donald Trump. Because Donald Trump came and supported me in Minnesota in 98. Donald ain't a Republican, he's an independent.
Right.
He just joined the Republicans like Bernie joined the Democrats. Well, Trump watched Pat Buchanan destroy the Reform Party. He essentially now did the same thing to them, right back in their face. He came in and destroyed their party of what it used to be. So I cheer him for that. Now, I've known Donald for 25 years. I consider him a friend, but will I support him? No, because we differ completely on the Middle East. I'm anti-war, get out of there. They're gonna go to war. No matter which one of these two people you elect, 4 years from now, we're still gonna be at war. But having said that, I also differ with Donald on immigration. I live in Mexico half the year. I love Mexicans. They're wonderful people. I don't want to live in East Berlin.
Right.
We're going to put a wall up. Excuse me, Ronald Reagan is the icon of the modern day Republican, right?
He's supposed to be.
Well, I don't think Ronald Reagan could even be a Republican today. But that aside, it seems to me his iconic quote was, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." What is he thinking today, knowing the United States is possibly going to build a wall and that we're going to become East Berlin?
So putting the wall
Here's
aside.
your trade-off. Wait,
Yeah.
here's your trade-off. If we're going to, then we should take down the Statue of Liberty.
There you go.
Because the Statue of Liberty says, send us your poor, send us your downtrodden and all that. Well, we obviously don't want them, so let's take down the Statue of Liberty. It's outdated today.
Right. I mean, isn't that the whole point of immigration? Usually countries don't send you their brightest and their best, but it's the people that need help, and that's why most of our ancestors came here.
The people who come here to make their way, to go after the American dream. You can come here as an immigrant and end up a millionaire. The opportunity's there.
Yeah. So I'm with you on all of that, and I've said many times, I don't know if the wall is sensible or financially sound or any of that stuff.
Wait, I'll tell you how sensible it is.
Yeah.
You build a 30-foot wall and I'll find somebody with a 31-foot ladder.
So it's good for the latter people too.
No, it does work though. You want to know how I know it works? Because centuries ago, they built the Great Wall of China, and there ain't one Mexican that I know of that's gotten over it.
That is a good point. That's I can't think of. I'm gonna have to Google that after and find out what's what. So I know a certain amount of people are going to hear you and they're going to say, "Wait a minute, Ventura wants open borders and blah blah blah." What would you say about? Because you also don't trust the government, so it puts your position in an interesting spot. Because I'm with you, but then it comes to, all right, well, how do we vet people properly? And I don't trust that the government will do it properly or knows how to do it properly or even can do it properly.
Well, government's about compromising. So I'll give you my compromise, okay? You have to bring home and close our 178 military bases throughout the world and bring our kids home, and then use our military to protect our border. I heard an interview where a BBC guy was grilling President Putin of Russia, Vladimir Putin, and he was really getting on him about Russia's aggression. And Putin very calmly said to him, well, let's really talk about this openly. Russia has 2 military bases outside of the country of Russia. The United States, I believe, has something like 178. Who's the aggressor?
Yeah, I mean, Bill Maher says it all the time. It's like, we still have 40,000 troops or something stationed in Germany. The war is over.
Yeah.
The war is over.
And the point is, who's the aggressor?
Yeah.
Yet we accuse Russia of being aggressive. I would shine the mirror on us and say we're the aggressors. 178 bases throughout the world. For what? Bring them home. Close them down.
So if enough people...
Let the rest of the country defend themselves.
Yeah. So if enough people heard that message, how do you actually do it? Because I think a lot of people hear the spirit of what you're saying and say, yeah, it doesn't make sense to do all this stuff. But how do you actually untie all of this stuff?
Well, Ron Paul, I remember when Congressman Paul was opposed to the Iraq War, and they said, well, we're already in there. How can we get out now? And I thought Congressman Paul had the greatest answer in the world. He said, we marched in, all we have to do is turn around and march out.
Yeah, but do we bear some responsibility then? Because although I obviously was...
what?
Well, like, for example, so when we went into Iraq originally, by the time Obama had us pull out, it was doing better. They were having free elections and all that. Then we left in haste, and now it's basically a war zone again. So it's like, we're damned if we do, we're damned if we don't. We got in, and then we left in a messy way, and now it's worse.
Okay, Jesse's going to give you the lesson on the Middle East now.
Bring it, brother.
I spoke once, and I had a woman come up to me after, Muslim. And as Bill Maher said, she was decked out in the beekeeper suit.
Right.
But her face wasn't covered, but she had all the Muslim attire. Young woman. She walked up to me when I was done speaking, and she said to me this. She said, you understand the Middle East. Why doesn't anyone else here? And now I'm going to explain it to you. What you have in the Middle East today is blowback. It is blowback from colonialism. You have to go way back to then. When Europe colonialized the whole world and went through that, when they got to the Middle East, they made the countries to benefit them, the Europeans. They didn't make the countries to benefit the people who lived there. You had 3 warring factions there, the Shiites, the Kurds, and the Sunnis. Rather than giving them all their own country, they put all 3 of them in every country.
Yeah.
So the wars continued on and on inside the borders of the countries. So the only way the countries could be governed was by a dictator. The minute then the United States comes along and decides we're going to remove the dictators and give them democracy. People who wouldn't know democracy if it bit them on the ass. We take out the dictators, and what do you have now? Total chaos and total disruption of the entire region. And when will the United States look in the mirror and take ownership for what's gone on over there? But we don't bear the ownership, do we? ISIS exists because of what we did. We went into Iraq, and you got Bush and Cheney, who never went to war, running the op, right? Well, anybody with any knowledge will tell you, you don't disband the military like we did. We put them in unemployment.
Right.
Bremer went over there and kicked them out the door. Well, they then went up and formed and became ISIS. If you invade someone, you keep the military intact, because it's a strange thing with military. Military will follow who's ever in charge. That way you got the whole Iraqi army is still on the payroll. They can feed their families. They're going to do what you want them to do. Instead, George Bush and Dick Cheney and Bremer cut them loose.
Yeah.
And now we won't take responsibility. We created ISIS.
Look, if you want one other example of that, it's that we have a military dictatorship now after they tried democracy in Egypt, and it's one of the only stable places. Governor, I know you have to go, so real quick, who is winning this election? I want the official prediction right now.
Well, I figure Hillary probably because it's fixed. Well, her nomination was fixed. Why wouldn't you believe the rest of the election's going to be fixed the same way?
We shall see. All right, well, it's always a pleasure talking to you, Governor. I know you got a long day of press ahead of you, so I want to thank Governor Jesse Ventura for joining me on the show this week. And you guys can check out his new book, The Marijuana Manifesto, Jesse Ventura's Marijuana Manifesto, in the link that is right down below. Thanks again, Governor.